Yesterday, I made a video talking about if FGO could get the Arknight's base feature transferred into the game of FGO and how that would actually look if they decided to do something like that. But one of the common things I kind of saw in the comments and after the video released, discussed with other people in, say, my Discord, was that maybe Lasengle could actually ruin the idea of this base feature. It seemed like a good idea, but I don't know if Lasengle would be able to pull it off. Seemed to be the general consensus from people in my audience. And that led me to think, are Lasengle some frauds? You know, legitimately, are these guys actually doing a good job at running the game? And I'm not doing this to throw direct shade at Lasengle. I want to actually interrogate that question, because sometimes we complain about Lasengle not doing anything, but that was the same under DW. Anytime there was a dry period, we'd be like, oh no, DW, you know, we'd say stuff like that. But it almost feels kind of the same with Lasengle, but I also don't think we praise them for the few things that I do believe they do get right, which I've made a couple of bullet points, and I found an interesting interview from last month that I'd like to go over in this video as well. And finally, in all of these videos, like I always do, I would like to get your thoughts, but after I've gone everything, after I've vomited my take and my opinion onto you guys, and of course, after you've left a fat like and subscribe to the video, as I do try to make something worth watching whenever FGO is in a very big dry spell, so that would go a long way and I'd greatly appreciate it. But with that being said, let me talk about first the one thing that I think Lasengle is doing better than DW, and that is the amount of Saint Quartz that we're getting back. And I don't have the exact numbers to back it up, but I am working on going through and trying to calculate how many Saint Quartz we got under DW and how many we've gotten so far under Lasengle, because it feels really odd. I can get shafted in January on the Takaru and Koyan light banners that came out. Then I can summon on the Ushi Gozen and Yui banner and catch another shaft. Then I'm able to summon again on the Andromeda banner and still catch a shaft. Now, that's not me having bad luck, but that's me having enough Saint Quartz to actually do about 4 or 5 multis on each of those banners. I don't really recall being able to do that free to play when DW was in charge. It really felt like we only got our, 2 or 3 Saint Quartz a week if you managed to log in, and maybe 1 or 2 extra if you had your Saint Quartz fragments from the weekly missions. It feels as though we're getting more from DW. Now, we get random social media campaigns, or they'll do a live stream and just throw out 15 Saint Quartz. They'll give us a ton of extra missions. Take, for instance, what's going on right now for Ordeal Call 2, where they have all of these missions that just give you a boatload of Saint Quartz and a lot of other really good material as well. I just walked into my JP the other day and found I had 200 5-star EXP cards and decided I'd start grailing some extra people because they just threw that out there. And it feels as though they're being a bit more generous with some of the materials. And I know I can't be the only one that feels that way, but I wanted to at least open up and say, yeah, I do feel as though they're a bit more generous than DW was. And that's definitely not nothing, because if you don't have any Saint Quartz, you're probably not pulling any of the new characters you want to get. So the fact that it feels as though they're giving out more of those, I definitely like. But there are some things that it feels like they're dropping the ball on. For one, animation updates. It has been, 2-3 years since the last animation update over on the JP version of the game? So much so that the wiki has actually been keeping track of all the year 1 servants that still do not have animation updates. And it's quite the plethora of servants over here that could still use a decent animation update. And there are even some year 2, year 3 servants that could probably use a little bit of polish. And I know it sounds like a really ridiculous thing to complain about, but for instance, when I would try to use Gilgamesh on the NA version as opposed to the JP version after he got his animation update, I felt like I was using a wet paper towel version of my Gilgamesh. Even though they were practically the same unit, it just doesn't feel as good. Imagine if your favorite servant is someone like Medusa or Medea from Stay Night, and they have these absolute crusty, dusty 2015, 2016 looking animations. That's not going to make you feel good, especially if you pour grails and stuff into them just because you really like these characters. I mean, Jolt is another servant that I really like, and her animations really are starting to age quite a bit, and I would like to see something done about these older servants. And again, I don't know if they're more strapped for time, which I will talk about. That is part of the interview that I found from about a month ago that I wanted to go over. or if they're just too busy working on other servants, which I'm not sure if that's the case, because I'm not sure if you have to do the same entire 6 months process that we know that it takes them to make these units to actually update their animations, because that entire 6 month process is making their skills, balancing it out to make them seem decent, making the animations, writing all their lore, maybe putting them into an event or something if they come out with a story chapter or an event chapter. That whole 6 months period that they've talked about, that's for the entirety of the servant, not just the animations. And I can't imagine it's going to take longer than maybe 2-3 months at tops to start working on some of these animations. And again, FGO is the #1 mobile game on the planet. If the team is too quote unquote small, we could always hire more people to have them work on, say, the animation staff. I mean, hey, I saw that anniversary thing that we got last year. That was a very, very good looking animation. We could put some of those guys on some of these older servants that could really use it. Now, talking about the scheduling, moving into this, it does feel as though the game is downright dead at some times. And I know that for some people that have very busy jobs or very busy work schedules, life, you got like a family, kids and stuff. I understand that that can be very helpful for those people, that not having to necessarily log in and play for an hour or two every single day can be very helpful. But on the other hand, you got to look at people that actually want to play the game. And when you look at your competitors, people like Honkai Star Rail, the Dokkan Battle game that I played, Arknights, all these other games, there's always at least something to be doing, even if there's not an event coming out. I mean, Arknights can feel a little bit slow sometimes. I'm not exactly letting them off the hook, but at least there are still things to do. Things like the integrated strategies or running through story, because their story is a little bit harder, admittedly, at least in my opinion. But you always at least feel as though you have something to do. I mean, even I'm aware that Genshin has about like a weekly mission thing that you're able to go do. That's something that I wish FGO would have during some of these slower periods. So if you need extra time to get these events out, I understand you got to write them, you got to make a new servant for them. You might be rolling out buffs, you want to decide what you're going to put in the shop, all that good stuff, blah, blah, blah. I understand that, but what if we had, say, a weekly raid system or a weekly boss? Maybe you bring back, say, a memorial for Goetia and you put out missions. Say the missions could be stuff like beat Goetia with an all-saber team or beat Goetia with an all-arts team, something along those lines. I know some of those wouldn't be as hard, but, you bring out a weekly boss, you get a Saint Port for beating them, and then you could even earn fragments, lores, stuff along those lines for fulfilling the missions. And that, I think, would also get people to use other servants, because a lot of players will stick to their normal core group of servants and won't really deviate from them. But if you have to beat, say, Tiamat with all archers and you kind of soup up the boss a little bit more, you give her some break bars and whatnot, it might actually force people to go look for other different units. Now, I wouldn't say block off the friends list like you did for Advanced Quest, because that might make things a little too difficult for some players. But I think there could be something done about some of these dead periods. And on that, I want to read this interview that I found on February 14th, 2024, where the staff mentions that they talk with Type Moon about the schedule and they suggest what events go where. And they were talking about January, where we had the collaboration, that spot was blank, and so they wanted to do something for that spot but didn't know what to plan for because Type Moon wasn't really telling them. Then if you kind of keep running down, they say around the time when Samurai Remnant comes out, they mention, hey, we're going to do the Samurai Remnant collaboration. We're going to give you guys Takadu and all that stuff. But even as you keep reading through it, and I should be showing it somewhere on screen so you can also read it, but they seem to be a little confused about the schedule, because Type Moon knew that they were putting out this game and when it was going to be coming out, but it seems that Lasengle wasn't fully informed, as they had that slot still blank and weren't exactly sure what they were going to throw in there, and Type Moon wasn't really talking back to them, which makes me think that maybe there's a bit of a communication problem between Lasengle and the Type Moon half of, well, the whole Fate Works. That maybe Lasengle wants to go through and do things, because again, as they say in this interview, they prepare things far in advance and they like to be ready, so we don't have, a Lost Belt 7 dilemma where it gets delayed for about 2 months, or an Ordeal Call 2 where this feels like it should have been out 3 or 4 months ago. They seem to be wanting to avoid these kind of issues, so they try to plan really far ahead. And I'm sure they're aware that a lot of other mobile games that are out there are putting out very consistent content that they probably want to be able to match. They probably don't want to have these random dead periods, but if they're not getting any material to use, I can understand why they maybe throw out those random banners. That would honestly just be my speculation. I haven't found an interview for it yet, but it would make sense that if they're not really getting anything from Type Moon, that they would say, all right, let's just throw out a bonus banner to kind of give ourselves a bit of a week. And let's just throw something together while we're trying to wait for Ordeal Call 2 to be finished written, or something along those lines. Again, could be speculation, just kind of some thoughts I'm getting reading this interview. Which, if that's the case, I do feel a little bad for Lasengle. They might have it a little rough if they're not exactly getting all the material that they want at a consistent rate. I mean, you have things like, say, Genshin and Star Rail run by MiHoYo over there, where it seems to be a very tight run ship, where you have these 6-week blocks where they kind of let the players know, hey, this is what's all coming out, then the next 6-week block is going to come out, and so on and so forth. As far as I understand, seems to be pretty well run. I'm not going to say those games don't have their dead periods, but all I'm going to say is that every time I log into Star Rail, I always feel like I have something to do. And in fact, when I played Genshin for about a month, I felt like I had way too much to do, actually. Which again, might also be something they're trying to avoid, having too much content to do, as say when you start the Dragon Ball game that I play. If you're a newer player, you have an overwhelming amount of content to do, and they may be trying to avoid overwhelming new players as they try to get in there, which admittedly is a healthy balance you do have to strike. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about in regards to Lasengle, and this is something that has specifically come up since they've taken over, and that's the idea of FGO2, which I am very, very torn between. Because on the one hand, if you make an FGO2, sure, the game will probably have more content, it'll be more consistent, it'll probably look better, it'll feel more buttery smooth. I don't doubt that, because there are so many mobile games that come out more recently that just run really well, whereas FGO might crash my phone or even my emulator if I try to run Summer Morgan's NP, and I've still heard from some people that have problems with Gilgamesh's NP. That is a year 1 servant, admittedly with a newer animation upgrade, but come on, man, we cannot be crashing phones over, NP animations. But on the other hand, I completely get why a lot of the player base would not want an FGO2, because I don't want to lose my NP5 Morgan. I think it would really suck to lose that, because not only is it special to me because I got that done in under, what, like 300 Saint Quartz or something? It was very easy. But it's also Morgan. It's one of my favorite servants in the game. Now, I've seen some suggestions about, oh, if they do FGO2, maybe it's just a new app, but almost in the way that the Pokemon games had those apps where you could store your Pokemon from one game to another, then bring them over. Maybe they could do something along those lines, and I don't think there'd be any fuss or fuss. But it seems like a very delicate issue that they're trying to deal with, because FGO2 was on last year's anniversary survey. If I remember correctly, the options were continue into part 3, end service, or FGO2. And end service was only like 25%, and there was only like 3 options anyway. So of course it's going to take a huge chunk of the percentages. And a lot of people that probably chose end of service probably think that means we're getting a new game. But FGO2 is kind of a video topic for another day, because I feel like that needs its own dedicated video, because I have thoughts on it, and I don't want this video to be 20 minutes in and of itself, because I want to stay on topic for talking about Lasengle. And yeah, at the end of the day, I don't know, they feel very, very strange. While I do feel as though I'm getting more rewards, I mean, when Ordeal Call on the Bleached Earth map does come out, it's absolutely insane. You're getting a bunch of grails, a bunch of these random things for the Bleached Earth class-based thing where you throw your guys in there and you buff them up, lores, all that good stuff. But even now, random campaigns where they're just trying to help out people, in getting through the story. It helps out more veteran players because you just collect that immediately. I just got to get a whole bunch of free Saint Quartz, and it was super dope. But it does feel like they're dropping the ball in areas where there's no animation updates. Sometimes buffs that come out don't really feel like they're targeted very well at what the servant's problem actually is. New servants will come out, like, say, Takeda Shingen or Andromeda, who I think are more of the biggest proponents of this issue, that they come out and I'm not exactly sure what they want me to do with these servants. Where do you want me to use them? Are they supposed to be farmers? Clearly not. Their kit wants them to be in CQs, but there's not enough CQs to warrant me pulling for these units unless I just really like their designs. And so that also seems to be a little drop on the ball of not really understanding the meta that you picked up from DW and that you've kind of started to run with, but isn't really all that cohesive, if that makes sense. And then there's obviously the dead periods, although finding the interview and research for this video does make me feel a little bit better about it. Maybe it's an issue between them and Type Moon. I want to research that a little bit more, and I'll let you guys know in like maybe a community post or something if that is actually the problem, if I'm able to find anything else. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure because I don't work at Lasengle, so I really can't know. I can only give my speculation off of the interviews that I've been able to find. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Are Lasengle some absolute frauds? Did they maybe bite off more than they can chew? Or do you think they're doing a fine enough job? I'd love to get all your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace late, guys.